Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Of course, we're going to first hear the interview that we had with the Colombian Ambassador to the United States, who is going to be discussing discussing Venezuela. Some of you may ask, what's this obsession with Venezuela? Why are you constantly, oh, come on, that's not what I really wanted to. Okay, that happens sometimes. Anyhow, you may want to ask, why is it that we are constantly talking about Venezuela? Here is the deal, folks. Venezuela is a very, very, very serious issue, right? And just like we had a mainstream media a long time ago that allowed us to go into war with Iraq without anybody saying anything, the same thing is applying with Venezuela. Nobody is sitting down there talking about Venezuela, and it's a very, very important issue. Why am I saying this? Look, as it turns out, we could have ourselves hello, Bo, thank you very much, and I'll talk to you later. We could have a very serious issue here on our hands, and there's several reasons why. And what I want to do is I want to take it one step at a time. So what I'm going to first do is give you that particular interview. But before we go there, I want to change my screen here because there's a story that I heard today that was very disconcerting. It showed up on MSNBC, and anybody who listened to that particular story had to feel some sort of a, my God, what is happening here? There is this woman. She had appendicitis, and this is the reason why we need Medicare for all, and then we're going to get into Venezuela. But this is a story that I want people to not only hear now, I want people to tell people over and over again, because it's a very serious issue. But anyhow, this is what happens. There is this woman who went ahead and she had appendicitis. She checked with her doctors, or she checked with the hospital specifically to see, is my insurance covered by your hospital? Are you guys sure? And every step of the way, this woman checked to ensure that the hospital was within network for what she was doing. Every step of the way, she checked. Now, what happened? It turns out then that after a few months, she receives a bill for $4,700 from one person, the surgeon, that took care of her. And why did she receive that bill? She received that bill because it turns out, in as much as the hospital told her that their services were in network, this particular doctor that was working at the hospital that day to perform the surgery that day was not in her network. He did not accept her insurance, and he socked the bill to her, the entire bill, $4,700. Now, here's the deal. She said, you know what? I did my part. Every step of the way, I asked if this was going to be covered by my insurance company. They all said yes. And what happens? They send her a bill. Now, here's the deal, people. She decided not to pay the bill because she said she did her part. They turned that over to collections. But this is a kicker, and this is why I tell you, people, you have to be aware of what's happening in our country right now and the rights that these politicians are given to businesses in lieu of rights to people. What did they do? They went ahead and docked her salary. 25% of her salary was docked without her consent, because this bill collector in the state of Colorado could actually go ahead and dock her salary for this bill owed. But not only that, they put a lien on her house until that bill was covered, meaning she could not sell the house, she could not refinance the house, she could do nothing. So here's the deal. Here we have somebody for healthcare doing everything she could. She had an insurance policy, which she was paying. She asked the people before she got into the hospital whether they accepted her insurance company. What else can you ask them to do? And still, she is asked to pay monies. If a doctor in network was at that hospital, as she thought, would not have been there. But secondly, the fact that now they can come after your home, the fact that they could garnish her salaries. Folks, anybody who doesn't believe in Medicare for all, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, agnostic, libertarian, whatever you are, if you don't believe in healthcare as a right and being able to handle this, because this is, look, a lot of conservatives may say, well, she should have really made sure. Well, hell, if you have appendicitis and you don't know which surgeon is going to cut on you, you think you're going to say, well, please, before you cut on me, make sure that surgeon is going to take this particular insurance policy. And even if that were the case, isn't that arcane that while you are trying to live, while you're trying to survive, that is something you have to do? Where is the passion? Where is the heart? Where is it? Folks, we have to be better than that. Medicare for all. I just had to tell this story before I got into the interview. But without further ado, what I'm going to do, my friends, is I'm going to go ahead and get this interview cracking, listen to it, and then we're going to come back after this interview. And please stay with me. Please share this stuff. It's important that people understand what's going on in the country. I may break into the interview depending on what happens, but here it goes.
I have here a Texans fan, team that we screwed over and over again last year and the year before. I think we won at Houston 34-0.
This is the ambassador of Colombia, and because it's the ambassador of Colombia and I am just a merely person interviewing him.
A pure mortal.
I am a pure mortal. I'll be very, very kind. But the ambassador here got his degree from the University of Texas in journalism.
I'm a Longhorn.
So therefore, you're a Longhorn, and for everything that we've said here, you're forgiven. Anyhow, let's get busy. We're about to get started.
Okay.
I am here with Ambassador Francisco Santos, Ambassador of Colombia, and who knows what else later on, but there's a lot that we have to talk about. First of all, Ambassador, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm a journalist at heart and as profession. I was kidnapped by Pablo Escobar in 1990.
Yes.
Because of my very strong stance as a journalist against drug traffickers, against terrorism. Then I created an NGO that helped kidnap victims in the 90s.
First, people don't know what an NGO is. Explain what that is.
A non-governmental organization that used to help victims that were being kidnapped in Colombia. Nobody used to help them. Then in the year 2000, when we were doing huge marches against the terrorist groups because of the kidnappings they were having in Colombia, I was targeted by the FARC, and I had to leave Colombia, and I went to live in Spain. So twice I got only 5 lives. Of a cat, I have 5 lives only.
You have 4 left.
I have, and after that I was in Spain, and candidate Álvaro Uribe said to me, "You want to be vice presidential candidate?" I said, "I don't know nothing about politics. I'm a journalist." And he said, "Don't worry, you'll learn." And crazy as I am, I said yes.
And you became the vice president of Colombia.
I became vice president of Colombia between 2002 and 2010. We changed Colombia with President Uribe from almost a failed state to one of the jewels in Latin America, with the help of the U.S., with the help of Plan Colombia. And I have to be very grateful to to what the U.S. taxpayer and politicians did regarding Colombia. Afterwards, I went back to journalism. I was being so hard on the president, then Mr. President, that I got fired. Because
And when did you get fired?
in 2012, because I wouldn't put the pedal off the metal. So that happens in our region and in our countries, and after that I decided to go back in politics, and I've held my party. I held my party, win elections, lose elections. I was candidate for the mayor of Bogota. I lost, and I helped President Duque get elected from our party, and he decided he needed sort of a bicultural person to be in Washington, and so he decided to pick me as.
What do you mean by bicultural person in Washington?
I'm a big part of me is American.
Right.
I went to school here 5 years. I love this country. During the 8 years with President Uribe, I had to come to Washington many times to show the progress in Plan Colombia, to show what was happening in human rights, etc. So hey, I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan. That cannot be more bicultural than that.
And you're a UT Longhorn, so
Yes.
I will attest to that.
Yes,
And given that I'm originally from Central America as well, Panama, I think we kind of share that same history. And by the way, I could also be considered an honorary Colombian because Panama was once the province of Colombia.
Yes, sir. Roosevelt took that away from us.
Oh, well, I did. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring that up about the gunboat on the in front of Colon or not, but I guess since you brought it up. But anyway,
it was called gunboat diplomacy
it
for
was
something.
called gunboat diplomacy for a reason. Anyway, we got the canal, and you got an ally. But anyhow,
we got great friends, and we have a great relation with Panama.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's move this on a bit to Venezuela. I don't know where you're going to stand on Venezuela, but I definitely have some issues that I'd like to discuss with you on that particularly. First of all, express to me in your own words how you see the Venezuelan situation, not necessarily concentrating on Maduro, but Venezuela as a country.
The biggest humanitarian crisis in the world right now, in the world. The biggest refugee crisis in the world right now. The biggest tragedy, economic tragedy probably in the world, other than North Korea. With continental dimensions. 1.3 million refugees in Colombia. 600,000 in Peru. Between 250 and 300,000 in Ecuador. 180,000 in Chile, and around 100,000 in Argentina, and in Brazil we don't know how many because of the. But
and Panama has quite a few as well.
no, and they're going to start moving. If we don't solve that, we will have probably 1 or 2 or 3 million refugees more in the next year and a half. That's going to destabilize the continent. So for all of you U.S. Listeners of this program, you have your backyard on fire. This is probably the biggest crisis the U.S. The continent has had in its history, a humanitarian crisis. And I think what we are working together, the countries from the Grupo de Lima, which is Latin American countries that come together to solve this problem, with the U.S., it's a task at hand that needs to be performed, because otherwise the U.S., Colombia, and the region can have a crisis like Somalia. Venezuela can become Somalia on steroids, because it has oil, it has drug trafficking, or worse even, Syria. So that's the level of crisis that the continent has regarding Venezuela.
Okay, now let's go specifically to Nicolas Maduro. And I want to ask a question in this fashion. Was Nicolas Maduro elected democratically or not?
No.
And how would you explain
it was a farce. It was a farce, because one of the things that the Chavismo did, and this type of socialist revolutions happen, is that once they're in power elected democratically, they start piercing and taking away all the independence of powers, all the possibilities of having free elections, all the possibilities of having real free elections, of having a political debate. The media is all controlled, and what you have is an electoral system that the presidency controls. Guess who counts the votes? So guess what happens? You always get elected. Remember, Ceausescu was elected
Right.
and had 99% of the votes.
We know that that was a farce. Now,
This is a farce, more sophisticated. A little bit more sophisticated, but it was a farce nonetheless.
let me ask you a few questions in that regards. Isn't it true that that several of the other parties chose voluntarily not to participate
Yes.
in the election?
Yes, because there were no guarantees of that of having the counting of the votes by an independent agency of the government to happen.
Is it also not true that there was a candidate that was leading, I can't remember his name off the back of my head, that the United States suggested strongly that he not participate in the election?
No, I don't know about that. I don't
Okay.
know if I don't know if the U.S. did something. I don't know, but
Okay.
but
The reason I brought that up in that part of the interview is that what the United States did was they wanted during that election for that election to have the ability to be declared an undemocratic election, and though there were people that could have run and likely could have won. In fact, that person I was talking about, I still can't recall his name, was actually either on par or leading in the polls, as I recall. And had he gone in there, he would have won, but there would still be sort of a mixture of a government, and that is not what the United States want. The United States want their people in there. But further in the interview, what I'm going to do, I'll explain some of that a little bit more in detail. So let's go ahead and continue. Let me make sure that I have the right buttons pushed here. Let me continue.
But you know what? I think the Venezuelans understand very clearly and have been worked very clearly in terms of the decision they are making. So I guess all of the main opposition parties did not go to elections because they understood that those elections were a farce.
Okay. Now, so are we saying then that we want that several countries should come together and overthrow a Nicolas Maduro, or are we saying we'd like to have a diplomatic solution in which negotiations are taking place? Because I think, isn't it not true that both groups, both factions, or actually several factions in Venezuela, actually it's more than just two factions in Venezuela, is it not true that no one of them really has a majority of the population that want
Look,
them?
The solution is very simple: free elections.
I think that's what everybody wants.
That's
right?
what everybody wants. Does Maduro want free elections? Certainly not. He would have had free elections 2 years ago, or a year ago. He could have resolved this. If he really was a Democrat, he could have done it just last year. So why didn't he? The problem is that we're talking about a thug, and he's a thug. Venezuela, under his
Leadership?
I wouldn't call it. To say about that's not leadership.
Okay.
Under his hand,
Under his tutelage.
under his tutelage, has become a rogue state. Most of Colombian drug trafficking is going through Venezuela, and there is
Let me ask you.
most of the illegal gold from Colombia is being shipped out of Venezuela and laundered in Turkey.
And Saudi Arabia.
I don't know Saudi Arabia. I know Turkey. What you are seeing is a country where illegal groups and illegal organizations and illegal mafias are thriving because they're protected by the state. So you don't. It's very difficult to negotiate with that type of regime. And so Latin American nations, what they have done is create a diplomatic blockade. U.S. sanctions are now squeezing the money out of the regime. The Constitution allowed for an interim government because there is. So you have in position the solution which is rebuilding the institutions and having elections. Can that be done with Maduro? I don't think so.
Some would say that the real issue here is, and this is not on individuals personally, because things have a way of having their own gravity. Some may have a belief that the real issue with both beginning with Chavismo and now with Maduro is that this is a socialist government sitting on top of the largest pool of oil. Do you think that has anything to do with America's great interest in Venezuela, while it does not have a lot of interest in many other countries where probably other atrocities similar or worse are occurring?
I don't know what other countries have similar atrocities. What I have to say is the U.S. is the #1 exporter of oil now in the world.
It will be, yeah, pretty soon, yeah.
So that argument would have been maybe valid 10 years ago. It's not valid now.
Yeah.
The U.S. is sitting in the largest pool of oil in the world.
We are.
So that's sort of the traditional argument that's being used. No, we have the worst humanitarian crisis. I've been in Cucuta in the past 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 3 times. You should talk to them.
Chicken and egg.
You should talk to them. You should talk what they are suffering, how they can get food if they're once a day, if they're lucky.
Yeah.
They have to decide which member of the family eats or doesn't eat. And you're talking about one of the richest countries in Latin America.
It
and
is.
they just threw it down the toilet.
Ambassador, chicken and the egg.
Okay.
I think Maduro mismanaged completely the Venezuelan economy. I think Maduro is a crook.
Yes, he is.
I honestly think he's a crook.
I agree with you.
My concern is that according to the numbers and according to the laws of the person who governed them, that he was elected. I know a lot of people may call it a fraudulent election, but here in the United States, and you probably shouldn't talk about this specifically, being the ambassador from Colombia to the United States, but we have a president in our own country that is that we think may not have been legitimately elected as well. I think we would take issue if Angela Merkel came and said, well, he is not really the legitimately elected president of the United States, and thus Hillary Clinton is the president. My concern, and this is where I'm trying to get answers from all sides, and it's essential that we get answers from all sides. Should we look through that prism that we have here in the United States as well, and say, just maybe, even if Maduro to many is illegitimate, that we should ensure that instead of having the threats of military intervention, having the threats of squeezing the economy and the people that are suffering, because I can see in your face, you've seen the pain of the people in Venezuela. You've seen that. They're hurting. But are they hurting because of the policies of Maduro or because of the external squeezing of the
let me first start by putting in context your commentary and your question. Is there a free press in the U.S.? Yes. Is there a free press in Venezuela? No.
I agree with that.
Is there free courts in the U.S.? Yes. Are there free courts in Venezuela? No. Is there an electoral system that are there checks and balances in the U.S. or in, yes. Are there checks and balances in Venezuela? No. That's what makes the situation different. That's what makes, what made the elections an impossibility for the opposition. The opposition wanted to go to elections, but who's counting the votes, it's not somebody that gives credibility, especially after what has happened, you decide not to participate. That's what happened. And what they're looking for is, we want elections under which we have the absolute guarantee that the one who has the most amount of votes will get elected. And I think that's one of the objectives, or the objective. And I think that's very important to understand in what all of the countries in Latin America are pushing for, one way or the other, and the U.S. too, and Canada.
I have one more Venezuelan question.
But you asked me, the second question was, if it was the sanctions. The sanctions started
under Obama.
But there were sanctions
Small,
to individuals.
People, yes.
Individuals, crooks that stole billions. you see is from 2002 to from 99 to 2019, the management of an economy and of a society under ideological perspectives, of there's no liberty, the state has to take all your liberties, the state has to own all the means of property, and this is what you got. This is a homebred crisis. This is something that Chavez and Maduro brewed and now have to drink.
Okay.
It's an internal destruction of the richest country in Latin America, and it's hurting us.
Right.
You know,
well, I mean, it's hurting. I agree that the turmoil in Venezuela is very damaging to Colombia, very damaging to Brazil, very damaging to all these countries. My only concern, and look, there are a lot of ideological arguments that I see coming from all sides in this particular debate, and I think one of the things that's concerning me is it's okay to have the ideological debate.
Yeah, it is perfectly.
What I think we have to be careful of, Ambassador, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I think what we have to be careful about is making sure that, in as much as we have ideological differences between the different types of economies that people want, that what we are putting out there is the absolute truth of what is actually occurs. And my concern, again, and I know you know the story of Carlos Andrés Pérez and these other former supposed democratic leaders of Venezuela. And I'm sure you also know that in as much as Venezuela has been sitting on a pool of oil for all this time, that the spoils had never gone to the vast majority, but to less than 10% of the population. So when we have Chavismo and all of that, to some extent Chavismo is the result, in my opinion, and you tell me if you agree or not, Chavismo was a result of an oppressed people by a perceived or a purported democratic country.
No, I wouldn't talk about oppressed people. It was a political decision that Venezuela took, and look where it has brought them. Sure, that they mismanaged a lot of their oil. Yeah.
Yes, the oil was mismanaged.
That the Venezuelans lived 100 times better in 1997 than today. It's also true. And 99%.
No,
look.
wait. Under just one number. Under Chavismo, poverty did get much better, correct?
No. Look, let me tell you.
Okay.
Let me tell you something.
Okay.
All the studies that you have now talk about a country that has lost its GDP
completely. I agree.
And it's now in almost absolute poverty.
It is.
Chavez found a gold mine, which was oil barrel at $100.
$100 a barrel.
So he was able, and he did. I wouldn't say he did good things in terms of providing. But
I think that part is. I think that part is important. I think it is important for people to understand why Chavismo came about.
Oh no, I understand. No, I understand it. The problem with this is that Chavismo doesn't represent a democratic option. That's the difference.
What option do you call it?
No, that of having a transition of governments and of having a success of governments and of the only election, he lost a couple of elections, and when he lost them, he invalidated them. So he took the power. So to me, I don't care if Chavez is rebirth and gets elected, and he doesn't destroy the institutionality and loses 4 years, like it happened in Brazil, or it happens in Argentina, where they had the Kirchner and now they have Macri, or it happens in Chile, where they had Bachelet and now they have that's the main problem.
We shouldn't use Brazil. That's not a good example because of what happened to Lula and because of what happened to Dilma himself. But I mean, that's dangerous as well.
No, it's dangerous.
That could happen to. When you were vice president of Colombia, and folks, he was the vice president of Colombia. If I had understood what happened in how somebody had taken you out of power in Colombia after being legitimately and democratically elected, we would have raised hell about that as well.
No, I understand. I understand your point, but what I'm telling you is that Venezuela and the Bolivarian movement,
exactly,
doesn't. The majority of them, because there are some that don't.
Argentina supported the Bolivarian movement. Peru did, and so did Bolivia and several other countries.
What I'm telling you is that in those countries, institutionality was not broken and there were elections. Look, the Correa candidate in Ecuador lost.
Yes.
And you have now Lenin Moreno. Okay.
And,
Look,
and
in
institutions were maintained.
Exactly. What they
Yes.
destroyed in Venezuela was the democratic institutionality.
And I agree with you.
And in that sense, it went from, some would call a fantastic political experiment to a dictatorship.
Right.
When Chavez died, it was a dictatorship.
And
there was no freedom of the press, or there was no balance of powers. And I think democracy, if it doesn't have all those contexts,
right.
I need to break in here for one. He made a statement, and I didn't push back again. I'm speaking to the ambassador, and I wanted to get through some other points, so there was no need to get into a little bit more detail as far as when he said Chavismo was a dictatorship, etc. Chavismo worked, and Chavismo had the population. Yes, he didn't have the particular sect of the population that controlled the media, the sect of the population that was the industrialists, etc. But don't be fooled or don't be misconstrued. The reality is Hugo Chavez had a whole lot more support than anybody else in the country, and poverty did go down. That's a fact under Chavismo. Now, Nicolas Maduro came in, and what makes this all difficult is Nicolas Maduro is a lousy president. He's likely a crook as well. But the problem is what he said, what the people that are there to replace him, and the intervention by the United States, the European Union, and several Latin American countries, their goal isn't really to make Venezuela a better place or anything like that. Their goal is to ensure that there is this capitalist bastion again that will continue to screw its people. Make no mistake about that. So, I mean, we need to be cognizant of that particularly.
It's not a democracy. If you don't have checks and balances,
Right.
if you don't have a court that can stop a president, if you don't have a Congress that can become, if you don't have, those things are integral part of democracy.
And I think everybody would agree with you, and I think everybody agree that Maduro has severe problems, and ultimately Maduro is not going to last. We know that. Now, when it comes to solutions, why do we want to make Guaido the solutions as opposed to simply keeping the status quo and working towards a national election? And that's the last question on Venezuela.
Because the Constitution, when the elections are invalid because of the fraudulent or there's a vacuum of power in Venezuela. The Constitution made by the Bolivarian, by the Bolivarian, let's say that.
I understand.
Says in article, I think 323 or 232, I can't remember, if there's a vacuum, the president of the assembly becomes head of state until there's a transition. And that's what happened. And look, and I understand some people might say, no, that shouldn't be. There's an option that happened, and now it's an option that the Venezuelans are looking forward, and it must be a transition. And believe me, if there are elections, Maduro's candidates or whomever the candidates of Chavismo are going to be able to run freely, and maybe then we will see what.
And maybe that's the point of compromise. Maybe the point of compromise is not requiring Maduro to step down, but requiring organized elections that are actually viewed from the external.
Yes.
But right now, what we have as a concern is Donald Trump has just passed or just submitted a budget where he's asking for $500 million to support democracy at whatever cost in Venezuela.
No, look.
And that would be a concern if you were the president of Venezuela or the president of Colombia. If you heard that there is a superpower putting that kind of money behind having some effect in your country, I think that would create some issues, right?
Let me tell you, if I were Maduro, I would be very worried.
Yeah.
And not only because of that, because he destroyed his country, because he is politically surrounded, and because the only way he can stay in power is with the Cuban thugs that he has around him. Mm-hmm. So yes, that for other reasons. What we are doing as Colombians and as Latin Americans, for the first time in history, is starting our diplomacy to create a new scenario for Venezuela. Remember, the Grupo de Lima, the U.S. is not part of the Grupo de Lima. And it was the Grupo de Lima that recognized the assembly as the only democratic institution left in Venezuela. It was the Grupo de Lima that created the scenario of putting an alternative. And that's the Latin American countries deciding the future of a country and helping decide the future of a country without the U.S. interference. I think that's a huge evolution in terms of political maturity for our countries. For the first time, the Latin American countries were sanctioning a country without having the U.S. in the middle of it. Because, unfortunately, for a reason that is traumatic, which is having millions of Venezuelans migrating. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have.
One question, as I don't remember his name right now, the envoy that Donald Trump just assigned to Latin America, who was once convicted.
Elliot Abrams.
Abrams, has he met with anybody from the Grupo de Lima?
Yes, he has met with all of us. I met him
okay.
Last week.
And that is my concern.
Why?
In as much as the Grupo de Lima is all, todos somos Latinoamericanos, all Latin Americans, that they would meet, I think it's problematic.
Working with the U.S. as partners to get this problem solved diplomatically, hopefully solved peacefully, and hopefully to make Venezuela return to a democratic scenario. I don't think you have seen that happening in Latin America ever. Before, it used to be a coup d'etat. That hasn't happened, even though we have a dictatorship in Venezuela. Sometimes from the left they say, oh, the American invasion. Really? The only country that's right now being invaded is Venezuela by the more than 20,000 Cubans that they have there.
Are there really 20,000 Cubans?
There are between doctors and military personnel, and the military personnel in Cuba is around 5,000, especially because they put a parallel government or a parallel.
You see how that becomes a problem when you say there are doctors that are Cuban and that's included in the 20,000, right?
Oh yeah, no, because they indoctrinate, because they create. So it's a civilian military invasion, but the invasion of the military is absolutely real. The military have a parallel organization that works at brigade level, at battalion level, of commanders from Cuban intelligence. So to deny it is no. That's the reality of what's happening in Venezuela right now. The only real invasion right now in Latin America is by the Cubans in Venezuela. That's a reality. That's a fact. So sometimes what you need and what you have is what you need to talk clearly. We are trying to get Venezuela back on track in a democratic scenario. That's what we're trying. We're trying to do it peacefully through a diplomatic blockade with economic sanctions from the Latin American countries and from the U.S. too. And we hope we'll be successful for the good of Colombia, of Latin America, and the Venezuelans.
I am so happy that you gave this interview. But I mean, would you say, and I think we can all conclude that what we really are saying here is we would love to have most, if not all, countries in Latin America and beyond be capitalist democracies. Is that correct?
Democracies.
Capitalist.
Real democracies.
Okay.
Democracies. Whatever model of economic decision making they decide, well, that's for the people to decide. Mm-hmm. If they decide and firmly decide and they that want to go this way or the other, that's their decision.
Right.
That's their decision. That's the decision that they have to take. The problem is when you take that decision away from the hands of the citizens. That's what's happened in Venezuela. That's what is happening in Nicaragua. And those type of decisions, when the powerful government or a president or the head of state takes away the independence of powers, you create that type of supposedly democratic country, but it's just a facade for a dictatorship.
Ambassador Francisco Santos, I hope I'll get a chance to talk to you, maybe, who knows, in a different position later on in life. And I hope that as a member of the Grupo de Lima, as you go back, you remember those words. A democracy with whatever economic system they decide that they want to have. to ensure that everybody in that country has equal access to success.
Absolutely. Yeah, I thank you, and
It's a pleasure speaking
and
to you.
Have a good day.
Great Longhorn.
And
Okay, there's a part there that I don't know if you saw the change in demeanor, specifically when I asked about Elliot Abrams. Elliot Abrams is a crook that works for that's been working for the Bushes, Donald Trump. He's the one that was involved with Nicaragua, was involved with I think El Salvador. I mean, anything nasty that occurred in Central America, he was like the henchman. And there he is working with the folks in Venezuela as well. So the narrative that, again, the ambassador is a nice guy. He has to do what he has to do. But the narrative that he was trying to put out there was simple. That Nicolas Maduro has to go. That a whole bunch of Central American and Latin American and South American countries, Latin America itself, that they are put a coalition together without being sanctioned by the United States to put out to get Maduro out of power. There are two problems there, right? One, who the hell gave them the right to say they're going into some other Latin American country to depose the president of that country, right? That's number one. Who the hell tell them that they can do that? And the second answer is, who the hell told them they could do it? And that is Elliot Abrams. When the ambassador told me, when he was talking about, I mean, notice how in the interview he wanted to stress that in an independent Latin American group of countries were working to oust Maduro. Now, NPR didn't ask him this. He gave the same spiel at NPR when he gave the interview to NPR. NPR didn't ask, by the way, you're saying this is an independent group that's being put together to depose or to oust Maduro. And you're saying it is a sumamente Latino, which means just a Latin American group that's doing this. So the question is the United States in there? And so my question to figure out if the United States was there is knowing that Elliot Abrams was the envoy to Latin America for Donald Trump. Simply ask the question. Did any of them meet with Elliot Abrams? And the slip was, oh, yeah, I did, and all of them did. Oh, really? So how then is the United States not involved? How else is Donald Trump just yesterday speaking about squeezing Maduro some more? How much is Brazil with Bolsonaro being talking about having to get rid of Maduro? Come on. This is all orchestrated. And notice the next question that I asked. Notice how he demeaned everything that Chavismo stood for. But what he was really saying all along is, well, you know, they chose it. They're the ones who chose it, and look at what happened. No, it's not look at what happened. It's look. Hugo Chavez was very generous in the way he used his oil when it was at a high price. To put it bluntly, at sometimes Hugo Chavez was naive in thinking that he could give he was supporting Cuba, he was supporting Jamaica, he was supporting Argentina. In fact, when he started to build his bank, all those countries, including a couple that's against Nicolas Maduro, they were well part of the Bolivarian revolution because they really thought ultimately because of the wealth of Venezuela, and yes, Venezuela is a very, very, very wealthy country. The country, not the individuals in the country. The individuals in the country that are wealthy are thieves. They are the ones who've been stealing the oil and giving it to the Americans, the Dutch, and the other European countries at a discount to make some money for them and not for the people of the country. Let's be real. This is about the pilfer of the resources of a country that is sitting on top of a pool of oil, and gold all over its rock structures. That is what we're talking about. And the idea of not wanting an election to go in no other way than they want it is to ensure that the Venezuelan plutocracy keeps control. Notice how they want to stop the gold that Maduro, they're messing with the oil. Maduro started selling gold to Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and all of that. Notice the ambassador said, oh, no to Saudi Arabia, right? because that creates a problem. Because Saudi is closer to the Americans than Turkey. Turkey and America is going, they're kind of. So there's a lot of undercurrents within that interview, and a lot of what I did in that interview is I wanted the ambassador to talk. I didn't want to say anything that would have stopped the conversation, because I know later on we can come back here and discuss that interview. I mean, he's a nice guy, and we try to all be civil in the conversations that we have. But make no mistake, what we are sitting on, what we are looking at, is the upcoming deliberate pilfer of Venezuela. They could not allow a democratic socialist government to thrive in Venezuela because it has natural resources. And what that would have changed, that would have set a new narrative. And what was that narrative? That narrative would be, well, the resources of the earth in that country belongs to every single Venezuelan. And as such, all oil sold wouldn't just be going to a few people for the spoils. It won't only be going to the plutocracy and the rich in that country that for decades have been pilfering the country. It would be going to the people to educate them, not just throwing money at the people, educating them, taking them out of poverty and all these things. What do you think that does if Americans learn about this Venezuelan experiment? What happens if America learns about this Venezuelan experiment? First of all, already we have places like, and we don't talk a lot about it. We have Alaska, who has an abundance of oil relative to its population, and they all get a stipend every year. We also have the countries of Norway, who depend a whole lot on the North Oil Sea, who get good, they get good social programs for the wealth of that country. Well, America is magnitudes wealthier than these other countries. We have just about every natural resources, from renewable resources to oil to gold to everything we have in this country. And the problem is, many of that is on public land. And instead of all of that being partaken by all the people in this country, it goes to a few. The spoils of that goes to a few. What happens when America learns that not only Norway, which we think is kind of, we don't speak a whole lot about, we don't talk a lot about Alaska, but what happens when we find out that country, everybody takes advantage of the spoils that come from having all those natural resources? Americans may wake up. Americans may see that they've been conned for decades. We can't have that. So we cannot allow in this country, America could never, ever, ever allow, okay? It could never, look, I want to answer something that Mike Cisak is saying. Norway does not use its oil to fund its welfare. Of course, look, all these things are fungible, okay? Remember that, Cisak. If they're using their oil for something else, they have more money for their welfare state. That's simple. If they didn't have the oil, they would have to use the other monies for it. So please do not assume Americans are stupid. That's what a lot of conservatives like to do. Not good conservatives. Good conservatives just say, I'm conservative and these are the things I believe in. Do not try to make Americans stupid, okay? All the resources of a land was not placed there by anyone. So anything on federal lands, and to put it bluntly, my contention is even deeper. I don't think anybody, whether you own the top of the land or not, should own the natural resources of that land. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that. Now, if you're planting a crop, hell yeah, that is your work, your deed. Yeah, you make money off of that. If you're planting trees, hell yes, that's your deed. That's your money. But by gosh, here is the deal, folks. Natural resources, oil, gas, gold, diamonds, that should belong to everybody. Now, if you are the person who dug it up and found it or whatever, yeah, you should get a digging fee or whatever, but then the biggest profit of that should go to the people. It's the people's land. And this just has to do with what's right, what's fair. Come on. And that is the fear of America right now. as people wake up, as people understand how things go, because most Americans don't sit down and think, hey, wait, in Colorado, all that shale is on public land. Hey, by the way, up north in Nebraska, the Bakken Faults or whatever it's called, wait a minute, isn't a lot of that public land? Why is it just the oil companies and their shareholders are getting the spoils from that, and the little taxes that we ask them to pay, they find a way to get out of it? People, let's get smart. And this isn't a conservative or democratic issue. This is an issue of ethics. This is an issue of morals. This is an issue of whether or not you are going to force the government to execute what is right for you. Before I forget, I got to ask folks, please, if you are not a subscriber to Politics Done Right, please go to patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Again, that is patreon.com/Politics Done Right. It's not Patreon like it's normally spelled, but it's Patreon. So it's patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Please support independent media. That's going to bring you the news. That's going to bring you the information as it really is. Not the lies that you're going to hear on mainstream media, or the lazy form of reporting you're going to get on mainstream media, or towing the line that you're going to get on mainstream media. Let's work on getting real news. If you go there and supporting our programs, you get How to Make America Utopia, which is a new book that I'm writing. You get access to that book chapter by chapter as I write it, goes online. But of course, a book that's complete already is As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. This book has been out already. It's fully available online. You can also go ahead and get it at Amazon or anywhere else. Look, there's a bunch of learning in that book, from patents right down. It makes our economy easy to understand, so that later on when we go into subjects like money, MMT, modern monetary theory, that everybody wants you to laugh at because they don't want it to take seriously, because it's a monetary system. It's a middle class and poor monetary system. What I mean by that is finally we'll have a system biased towards the middle class. What it means, bias towards the middle class, it means that the middle class gets access to real money, as opposed to just the banks who create money under the auspices of the Federal Reserve, etc., etc. For once, we would have an economic system that says if there are jobs to be done and there are available bodies to do that job, money will not be an option to stop the execution of that transaction. Job worker. So modern monetary theory, you're going to hear a lot of people say, no, that's crazy, that's inflationary, it's BS. And how do we know it's BS? I'm going to give you a little thing called quantitative easing. Look it up. The only difference is that quantitative easing now is for the companies, the wealthy bankers, right? Like I said, we always forget about the poor. We always forget about the middle class. We only always support the plutocracy. Folks, you're going to hear the truth here. Please support Politics Done Right. Go to patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Patreon, patreon.com/Politics Done Right. And by the way, my other book is out there. Lose Weight and Be Fit Now. Why am I doing that? Why is a political guy doing that? Well, you know why? Because, hey, I went through quite a bit of weight ups and downs, and also health issues with blood pressure that almost killed. And I finally bit the bullet, and this is what I did. And I put it in a book to help defray the cost of being a political activist. So support us also. Anybody who subscribes to the program gets access to all these books and the other books that I'm writing this year online. And again, like I said, you can get these at Amazon.com as well. Okay, I'm going to be going back to the program now. Now, folks, so let's not be fooled as far as Venezuela is concerned. Venezuela is going to be used for one thing and one thing only right now, as a distraction. And if they need further distraction, if things are going too badly for Donald Trump, he will actually go into Venezuela with troops. I mean, if he needs a boost or something like that. Right now, he wants to keep Venezuela as a representation of what the Democrats are going to bring you, socialism. That's what he wants to do right now. So right now, it doesn't pay for him to invade Venezuela because an invasion may just go nasty, right? And that could bring him down. But an invasion close to the election is more apropos, right? So invasion not coming right now, distraction is. So the distraction is associate Democrats with socialism, associate socialism with Venezuela, with the idea that that will depress anybody who's voting for Democrats. Second part is, if necessary, and by the way, we know that Maduro is not going to last by the hook or the crook. As you can see, he's been on every single border that he has. He has a United States puppet that is there and ready to support whatever it is America decides to do in Venezuela. So Maduro is not going to last. The only way Maduro lasts right now is if Americans rise up and start saying, America, stop its involvement, and makes his poll fall because of that. Unfortunately, if Iraq is any example, if Panama is any example, if all these places where we've invaded is any example, that hasn't happened because we've had a complicit media that was complicit with the Defense Department, with the military-industrial complex that just loves war. And that's why programs like ours are important. We have programs like mine, and there's a Majority Report, there's a TYT. There are a whole lot of them that are trying to put this information out there to force people to look at the way things really are. And I'm asking you to support us, folks. I'm asking you to support us so that we can continue doing this. So please go to, and the show is coming to an end, so this is my last ask. Please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. That is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. If you want to hear the truth, if you want to hear not what you're going to hear on TV, not the spin that you hear on TV, not the lies that you hear on TV. If you want to know what's really going on, check us out, support us, make sure that we're funded. We cannot do this without you. We simply cannot do this without you. Patreon.com/politics done right. Thank you so kindly for having been with us. I hope you enjoyed the interview with El Señor Francisco Santos, who is the ambassador to Colombia. He's a very nice guy. He went to my university. But again, this is politics. And right now, he has to play United States politics. That's just it. The rise has to come from the people of the United States to stop any bad things that we may do in Central America. We don't have a choice. We have to be proactive. We have to learn the truth. We cannot believe the crap that they're telling us. Just look into the past, how many times they lied to us. Every single time we're going to war. In Panama, 10,000 people had to die. In Iraq, hundreds of thousands had to die. In Afghanistan, hundreds of thousands had to die. In Grenada, thousands had to die. And we can go on and on. Invasions, attacks, wars that didn't have to be. And it cost every single American in some form, whether in blood of their kids, their families, their loved ones, or in completely depleting our treasury. So folks, again, please go to patreon.com/politics done right and support something that we all need, an avenue to get this information out. My name is Egberto Willies. I want to thank you from the depths of my heart for listening, for spending the time here. I love you all, and you know how I end this baby. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.